the 3 energy then increases, they're able to make powerful action in the world and become more goal-oriented. They take on a more positive self-view and a more positive, assertive, and decisive way of interacting with the world. Now, as we say, even though you go to this number for health and for development, you can also pick up some of the negativity or some of the negative sides of a 3. So then they can become more focused on accomplishment. You know, they can become really into the whole success thing as a replacement for being seen. So again, then it can be more about just image than substance. So then, when the 9 goes to the point of stress or disintegration, and I was talking with someone last week. She's not really, well, she doesn't live here, but she was here and she came to one of the classes and she was still struggling with trying to figure out her number. And so one way that you can kind of check in if you're struggling, say, between 2 numbers, is to look at the stress point and see, does this feel like I know this place? And usually what I find is that when people look at the stress point, they'll go, oh yeah, that's me, that's where I go. Like, and if you look at the other number and you look at the stress point for the other number and you go, no, I don't, that's not what I do. So often that's a way to work backwards to your number is, yeah, this is what happens to me when I fall apart. So the 6 is the loyalist, and when the 9 goes to 6, reactivity and worry replaces passivity. So they have more energy, but now it's not a good thing. It's about worrying, and it's about reacting to situations and to people. They go to self-doubt. You know, they're already not feeling necessarily great about themselves. Now they're starting to doubt themselves even more. Feels a sense of frozenness or paralysis. Seeks security in external structures that appear solid and safe. It's the result of having to make decisions or handling change and loss. So again, they've spent their life trying to avoid suffering, pain, loss. Now when you're in the 6 mode, all of a sudden it's pushing up and you're having to deal with it. They can become suspicious. Their anxiety intensifies and become more pessimistic. Now again, even though this is sort of the downside for them, there's always that little positive part then of the 6. And so the anxiety serves as the alarm bell to what is important. So it becomes like, you know, a little fire under them to figure things out. Because the 9s, I think, are the one number that won't be here at the Enneagram. Or they won't be at the self-help, because that's too much work. It's like, yeah, I'm interested in growing, but yeah, I think I'll just turn over and go back to sleep, or I'll watch TV. You know, it's too much work to go out and to do all that, and to put the energy into navel gazing, you know, or to doing the work of looking at what's not working in my life. They may have a thought about it, but then they'll just kind of push it to the side. So when they go to the 6, the fire sort of gets lit under them to come on, you know, think, do something, figure it out. So, so for growth then, so here's something for them to consider. If you realize that you are important and loved for yourself, what would your life be like? So that's a good, well, again, as I said, many of these things are good for all of us, but that's a good one for a 9. So the issues then for growth: how to keep the ability for unity which is blending and merging with others and the environment, because they're very good at that. They just kind of merge, you know. If it was traffic, they'll be following along nicely. They're not racing ahead. They're not cutting people off. They're just, you know, they're in the middle lane, just keeping their spot and being nice, playing nice. They blend and merge with others in the environment. So how to maintain that and at the same time do some work about reclaiming their forgotten self. So the growth path for them is to recognize and deal with anger. So that's one of the first things. And to use it as a resource for change. To look at it more in a neutral way. Okay, this is just energy. How can I direct this energy? Learn to be more selfish. Know and claim what you want. In other words, take the time to just consider the question if someone asks you, where would you like to go for dinner? To just say, well, let me think. Yeah, you know, I kind of like Mexican. Just making that effort rather than their usual response is, well, where would you like to go? Which is just not engaging energetically enough. So engage, think, feel, come up with your real wants and desires. Develop boundaries. Be firm with your no when needed. Because again, nines will let you kind of walk all over them or push past them. They may say no and you say, come on, you know, let's do it. And then they'll do it. Instead of saying, no, I really don't want to do that. So again, it's like just engaging, taking a stance, being in touch with what you really want and need, and being willing to express it, and let the chips fall, you know, where they may. It's like, it's not going to be World War III. It's like, it's okay. You can make a decision that doesn't go along with everybody else. Accept suffering, especially discomfort, anxiety, and change. So again, just deal with, you know, what we all deal with, the things that we don't like. And it's not going to be the end of the world. We will survive. Be brave in the face of necessary conflict. Don't placate, don't hide, don't pull back. Stay in the body. And you see, this is the irony, like with the circle of types. Up here is the body type, so we have the 1, the 9, and the 8. And they're supposed to be the body type. They're supposed to be the one who really is in touch with their intuition. And yet the 9 is probably the person who's least in touch with their intuition or their body. Because again, that takes work. You have to pay attention to your intuition. If you're sort of asleep, you're not going to be. It says vigorous physical exercise is very helpful for a 9. Gets them into their body. Stay in the body. Identify and focus on needs and desires. Stay present and engaged. So again, in a group setting, you know, the tendency for them is just to drift off and not necessarily be engaged with who's around them. Kind of go into your own world. Be willing to own your part of an altercation. So I think there's a lot of shame for 9s around anger. And so when they do explode, it's very hard for them to accept that, oh, you know, I exploded. It's just sort of too much. And so there's the stubbornness and this passive aggression about just owning up to your part of what happened, of the conflict. Because they're so enamored with peace, like they've dropped the flag, literally, the white flag of peace, you know, and therefore it's really hard for them to have to admit that I did this. Again, setting goals is important for 9s. create structure, set healthy limits on vegging out, deal with indolence and apathy, recognize what truly matters. The gifts of the 9 are non-judgmental, and that's why we all like to be around the 9s. The 9s are not going to start sharpening their knives and having you for dinner. They're not going to attack. You know, you can get into conflict a lot with the 1s who are very judgmental, or with the 8s that are very in your face and aggressive. So 9s aren't like that. 9s are like teddy bears. You just kind of feel good when you're around them. So it's a very seductive energy. They're excellent mediators, as we said. They're empathetic, genuinely caring, supportive. They desire to contribute and ability to give freely. So that's one of the things about 9s, as I said. They're really good friends. They're good co-workers. They'll help you out if they can. They can be very sensitive to others. They can have a great ability to compromise. But sometimes, as we said, they overdo that. They can be adaptive, over-adaptive, accountable, and have the ability to merge with others. They can be very stable. So again, for the types that feel like they're not really grounded, or that they're up and down, or they're all over the place, a 9 can be a very solid, calming, stable presence that is like an anchor in your life. So, you know, I guess in couple relationships especially, the 9 can just be this rock, solidity, grounded. Okay. Let's see. Tips. Okay, how to get along with a 9. Don't pressure me. I need my time and space. Ask me my opinion before offering yours. Because, you know, if you offer yours, the tendency is for them just to go along with yours. They're not going to say, well, I disagree, necessarily. So ask them first. Then they're kind of on the spot. They have to be honest and say, well, this is how I feel. Okay. Remember that small conflict feels big to me. So they have sort of a super sensitivity to any conflict, because as children they had this fear of abandonment, that if they rocked the boat in some way, they would lose out. So you may just, you know, say something very lightly, or you think it's insignificant, but that can cause a lot of stress or pressure for the 9, because it's conflict, and that feels big to them. Raised voices, angry gestures overwhelm them. So again, you know, if small conflict is challenging, big conflict and people, you know, going off in their presence is really stressful for them. So you can just sort of imagine them going into their shell even more. Include me. Tell me why you want me there. Because again, the 9 will say, well, oh, I don't need to go to that because you guys will do it without me. Because again, there's this self-deprecation that they don't value necessarily their own wisdom or what they have to contribute. And they'll just kind of let it up to the group. Open-ended questions are generally best. Take an interest in my needs, in my life and philosophy. Avoid acting pretentious or condescending. Suggest an activity when I've lost my inertia. And I would say, and then be prepared for them to say no. Be willing to sometimes veg out with them. So, you know, you can just imagine then if you're planning to go on vacation with a 9, where's the 7? So I don't think a 7 and a 9 would be on the same page on vacation, because the 7 will, you know, want to do 10 different challenging things in one day, and the 9 probably will be up for 1 and then want to take a nap. Whoops. At work. So they're acids at work are they're grounded, they're balanced, they're even-keeled, they're able to step back and gain clear perspective. They're good communicators. This is another gift of many of the nines. They're very good communicators. They're cooperative and open at work especially. Can work well with all sorts of individuals. Again, they're not going to bring that sort of judgmental energy that some of the other types can bring. They're more accepting. They merges diverse interests to find commonality. So again, they're very good at bringing a group of people together, like on a team, for a common project and common goals. The challenges for the nines at work: state clearly what you want. Again, the tendency to not do that. Establish personal positions, define your role. Stop trying to be all things to all people. You know, if you're the personnel director, you're the personnel director, you know. You can't please people all the time. As the personnel director, you're going to have to take a stand. And sometimes that involves unpleasantness and conflict. I would say, don't become the personnel director if you're doing that. Avoid going with the flow to avoid conflict. Learn to fight and stay firm. Don't settle for less. Stay focused on priorities and avoid distractions. So again, it's easy for the nines to be distracted, especially if it's something that's inviting them to less energy, a little more subdued energy. So, all right. So now we come to the subtypes, which, with all of the types, we talk about the fact there are like 3 distinct personalities within each of the types. And again, we have what's called the self-preservation, we have the social, and then we have the one-to-one or sexual. So self-preservation kind of tells you already what the emphasis is on. And for this 9, they're calling this the personality with the appetite. The name given to this subtype is appetite, but it's not just about eating. At a deeper level, it's about the need to find protection through the comfort of merging with an experience of the satisfaction of physical needs. So it's almost like maybe a self-soothing. And maybe that's why 9s can be addictive, that it's a self-soothing that they get from doing something. In this way, the self-preservation 9 fuses with a sense of comfort and physical satisfaction as a way of expressing the sloth involved in unconsciously avoiding being more open to the rigors of a more active and engaged life. So instead of doing that, being engaged, they will sort of self-soothe with whatever activity it is. Type 9 is the core point of what is sometimes called the self-forgetting triad. All 3 types at the top of the Enneagram, that's the 8, the 9, and the 1, in one way or another, go to sleep to their own needs and wants. Through consistently getting lost in one activity or another, eating, sleeping, reading, working. So again, working can be a way for them to kind of self-forget. They get lost in work. And they're getting this comfort that they're looking for. Self-preservation 9 simultaneously avoid or forget their own being, or the pain of the experience of an underlying void of being, and find a substitute sense of being in the comfort of the fulfillment of their appetites. So it's almost like they're taking on a personality even that enjoys this comfort, and then they live in that place of comfort. For self-preservation 9s, it can be safer to hide out in the comfort of a familiar routine than to show up and risk potential conflict or overstimulation. So they'll stay with what they know. It's easier to erase oneself through comfortable activities than to show up and put oneself out there for whatever might happen that doesn't feel peaceful or harmonious or is too different. So they won't be that excited about doing something challenging or adventuresome. They'll want to stay more within the confines. For the self-preservation 9, it's like there's a sense of abnegation or a giving up of the need for love and a corresponding search for comfort in pleasurable activities and a fulfillment of appetites to compensate for this lack. So again, probably going back to childhood, if you've given up on love, you just don't think, well, I'm not going to get that. Well, let me look for something else instead. I mean, this all makes sense. This is basic psychology, really. Appetite also refers to a sense of concreteness. So the 9s are like very concrete and can be materialistic focused. The grounding aspect of fulfilling one's physical and material needs in simple, straightforward ways. Self-preservation 9s are more concrete people who don't relate as much to abstractions or metaphysical concepts. So maybe unity is a little too metaphysical for them, too much work. Self-preservation 9s tend to be practical people, and they don't always put their experience into words. Everyday things can obstruct consciousness. They find experience much easier than theory, and they may be unaware of the need for introspection. So they may not even be in touch with that because they've never done it. It's like, I don't know what that is, and I really don't need to do it. The self-preservation 9 is more irritable and stubborn and has a somewhat stronger presence than the other 2 9s. Though they also experience a sense of inertia with regard to taking action, they have a tendency to seem more solid and to be more 8ish than the other 2 9 subtypes. Self-preservation 9s tend to want more time alone than the other 2 9s. So again, we talked about the cave. That's very 9ish. They like their alone time in the cave, and they can even do that even though they're in a house of people. They have their little place that they go to. Maybe the he shed. Is it the he shed? The he shed down at the end of the garden, or the man cave. In working on themselves, these 9s can move toward the virtue of right action through making more conscious contact with their anger and being more proactive in thinking, through and acting on their own self-interest and needs. It helps them if they can use anger to connect with their deeper power, to show up more in the world and risk acting more on their own behalf and in support of their own needs and wants. Okay, the second subtype. We've talked about that there's a counter type with each of the numbers. So this one is titled participation. So this is a 9 with participation as a label, you could say, or a goal. And this then becomes the counter type of the 9 personality. Social minds are the counter type of the 9 subtypes in that they can be workaholics. They express sloth through merging with the group, working hard in support of group interests, and prioritizing the group's needs above their own. These are people who are generous and unselfish, mindful of the group, and gifted in satisfying the needs of others to the point where they sacrifice themselves to satisfy the responsibility others want to put on them. So again, it's responding to the group. I'm in this organization, I'm in this group, they need somebody to do this role, okay, I'll do it. They can also be fun-loving and sociable, but when they work hard, they don't show their pain. They don't burden others with their stress. Social 9s are congenial characters with a need to feel a part of things that expresses an experience of feeling different or not fitting into the group or community. The social 9 is a light-hearted, fun character who expresses a driving need to feel a part of things. This underlying experience of not belonging to the group drives the social 9 to overcompensate by being generous and sacrificing, to do whatever is necessary to meet the needs of the group. They have very full lives, full of everything but themselves. They're probably on every committee they can possibly be on, so that their calendar is full of things to do for others. Social 9s get their identity and their sense of reality from belonging, but often doubt their own experience, their own sense of self. There is a passion or a need for doing what is necessary to be admitted to the group, to be one with the group, but it takes a lot of effort, and the social 9s can work hard in this effort, but also tries not to let others see how big this effort is, how much energy it requires. They don't feel they're suffering very much, and they don't feel euphoric highs either. They are more in the middle emotionally. And I think that's also sort of another similar trait for 9s. They're living in that middle band. You know, it doesn't get too exciting, it doesn't go too low, although they can be prone also to depression. But it's very much sort of a nice, kind of comfortable ride there in the middle band. Okay. Social 9s can be especially gifted mediators in that they naturally want to translate differing opinions so that everyone is heard and conflict in the group is avoided. This person can be a very good leader, the best kind of leader in the sense of being a good person, being unselfish, being there to totally satisfy the responsibility that others want to put on him or her. Social 9s can look like type 3s. They work very hard and accomplish a lot without showing their stress. They may also be mistaken for 2s in that they are more active in meeting the needs of others. But it's a different motivation. They're trying to meet the needs of others for a very different reason than the 2s. In working on themselves, social 9s can move toward the virtue of right action through getting in touch with the sadness about not fitting in that underlies their upbeat, congenial demeanor, and observing and becoming more conscious of how working hard to support the group may distract them from their own evolution. So again, it becomes a substitute. It's losing yourself in the group rather than taking the time to be in touch with oneself. So the third subtype, which is the 1-to-1, or what some call sexual, is fusion. 1-to-1 9s have a need to be through another, to gain a sense of being not found inside themselves through fusion with somebody else. So if you're not really in touch with your own self, you're going to vicariously latch onto someone in order to feel what that's like, to have a strong sense of self. They may have the sense that there are no boundaries between their experience of that and that of important other people in their lives. And then they tend to merge with someone else as a way of avoiding their own sense of being a separate self. A person with this subtype exemplifies the use of relationship to feed one's own being because it's too painful or too threatening to be on one's own. The problem inherent in the 1-to-1 9 stance is that true union requires that both people stand on their own feet before coming together to merge and meet. But these people may experience difficulty in locating their own passion for living, and so may look for it through finding it in another person. It's the unconscious use of relationship to feed your being because you are not standing on your own 2 feet in terms of living out your sense of purpose. This is a kind of substitution or compensation of another's agenda for one's own, because it's more comfortable to stand or to be through the other. You're not on the spot. Your needs, your feelings. It's easier to stand for this other person's needs and feelings. This person can merge with a partner or a parent or any important person as a way of finding a life purpose and avoiding their own experience of the lack of such a purpose in their own life. The merging with the other takes the form of an energetic taking on of feelings, attitudes, beliefs, and even behavior. This character has problems with identity and a lack of structure in their lives. They may be so focused on meeting the needs of others that they betray their own, and then they may engage in passive-aggressive rebellion. So of course you're going to be resentful at some point. You know, even though you're the one that's making your life all about this other person and their needs and wants, at some level you're going to be pissed off because your needs are not getting met. 1-to-1 nines tend to be very kind and gentle, tender and sweet, and the least assertive of characters. They are loving people, but their affection can be suspicious, and they can be too dispassionate. The 1-to-1 nine can look like a type 2, or especially a type 4. They may experience or express similar themes and feelings related to relationships, like melancholy, loneliness, and a fear of separation or abandonment. In working on themselves, ultimately 1-to-1 nines move toward right action to recognizing and acting on their deeper need for separation, trying to experience aloneness more, making conscious boundaries and not always finding a sense of being through company. In working on themselves, they need to explore their own interests, feelings, and desires to find their own identity and sense of purpose. And so then we have examples. Celebrities: Audrey Hepburn, John Goodman, Ringo Starr, Renee Zellweger, Whoopi Goldberg, Garrison Keillor, Tony Bennett. Now again, like I've often stressed, is that there's a spectrum. You know, you have a 9 with an 8 wing looking one way, you have a 9 with a 1 wing looking very different, and then you have 3 subtypes like this. So that, I mean, if you look at those, they're very different energies. Like Renee Zellweger and Whoopi Goldberg. Fictional characters, the dude from The Big Lebowski. Marge Simpson. Winnie the Pooh. Jeff Green, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Jerry Gergich from Parks and Recreation. Rose Nyland. Betty White. That's Rose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Golden Girls.
Golden Girls. Luke Skywalker from Star Wars.
Oh, cool. Cool.
The Dalai Lama.
I can see that.
And you know, he's got a little bit of an edge to him. There's like, you know, you can see the spark there sometimes when he gets going. Abraham Lincoln, Carl Rogers, Dwight Eisenhower, Gerald Ford,